There. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the stream. We have viewers. Yay, viewers. Hi, viewers. Welcome, viewers. Happy, whatever it means to you, Mother's Day. Yay. Hi, Abe. How you doing? Can I call you Abe on the stream? I can call you. Left control key is a lot of syllables. Hi, welcome. Welcome. So, thank you for joining here on Mother's Day in the US and Canada. I think Mother's Day is on different days in other countries. Cool. Other countries. But I did look up Canada because we have potentially a Canadian joining us today. Hi, if you're here yet. Be sure to say hi when you arrive. But happy Mother's Day to those who observe. And for me, big shout out to those for whom Mother's Day maybe kind of sucks. I am very fortunate to have my mom still with us, lives very close by, is coming over for lunch later. I've been really, really fortunate that my mom and I have spent a lot more time together during the pandemic because I've been helping out at her house, and it's pretty great. Oh, hey Pam, how you doing? Yes, I see. I'm festive today for Mother's Day, but there are other years when Mother's Day has kind of sucked for me. I don't have any kids. There were times when I thought it would be great to have some. That didn't happen. That kind of sucks. I have very, very dear loved ones who have lost their mothers, and this day is really painful and hard for them. And there's always going to be folks who maybe never had a good relationship with their mothers, and that is also kind of painful and sucks. And so I want to acknowledge all of that and think about how we might use today as a way of honoring a lot of different shapes and sizes and configurations of maternal, because it's not always your birth mother that is the most meaningful thing to you today. But no matter what is going on between your relationship with you and your mother and her state, there's always in your ancestry, there are always fascinating stories of someone on a maternal line. Just like kind of in real life, we go kind of find our chosen family and we maybe find those maternal figures and stand-ins. We can find other stories throughout our family trees of a paternal grandmother, or something way up about a story of somebody who's done something really admirable. So I hope we can kind of use the conversation to explore maternal lines and whatever they might mean for you. And I'm psyched to have a few people here because it means that maybe we can be a little more interactive today and look up stuff that's meaningful for all of you. So with that, all right, I'm moving you over there. See, you're over there now. And there, we'll do this. There, I'm trying a little bit different screen configuration for this stream. So I wanted to talk a little bit about maybe some changes that I'm considering for the stream, for the way we do research here on the stream. If you've seen past episodes, you will recall that I've been kind of beating the drum pretty hard about using free sources, free, and not having the advantage of the Ancestry subscription. And I jokingly said when our free trial expired that I was going to be hating life and doing that kind of research with an Ancestry free version. And what I found is that that's true. I really don't like it. We can go into this tree and we can find, if you go back to like the first and second streams that we did together, there was a lot of stuff where we just raced through this tree looking at census records and finding links to family books. And it was very cool and very fast because Ancestry has these massive repository of resources. And we also have been, not only have we had lots of luck with hints, but there are so many hints that I talk probably to excess on the stream about being really judicious about not taking hints, right? Because some of them they're offering up are not even valid because they're so forgiving of matches, right? And so maybe it's a match that doesn't work, or somebody else has got bad information in their tree, what have you. As soon as our free trial ran out on the version that we're using, all of that kind of came to an end. So on our previous sessions, we've gone through and done a ton of work going up the Hammond line, which is my paternal line, and also up the line of the Shumways, which is my second great-grandmother, my aunt's great-grandmother, who has the cool book written about her. And we got the way we were able to get to Honeywell and Emily in order to kind of open up the world of, oh, hey, there's a book here, there's a book here, there's free sources here, is it started with these early matches that we made on census records on Ancestry. Great. I figured when the free trial ran out that we would just hop on over to, oh, here, Family Search, right? And we would do record searches on Family Search, and we'd see how do they compare. And what we've learned in the last couple of streams is this is what I knew coming in is that Ancestry has a massive repository of records. They have both kind of public records and local records and original vital records and image files. And they've actually slurped in the image files that the Family Search people, which is the Family History Library, the LDS Church, those folks created those resources originally. Those are all, hello, puppy. Oh, hey. Wait, we got to take a puppy break. Hang on. Puppy break. Look, it's Puppy. Hi, Puppy. This is Pasha. He is not a maternal line at all. No, he's not, but he's a good puppy. There. Hi, Guy. Puppy stream. Oh, yeah. So, there. Nice. Anyway, okay, so, sorry, puppy break. We'll go here. We'll go back to me. Family Search has the original micro, so I figured, okay, fine. If you look at a lot of the probate records that are listed on Ancestry, a lot of the census records, those are all things that the original films are on Family Search. It's the exact same images. I think Ancestry's maybe done, in some cases it looks like they've done some post-processing. Sometimes the version on Family Search is more readable. It is useful to check both. You can tell it's the same image, but they've been processed differently. So I figured, well, heck, the stuff we care about on Ancestry is all on Family Search anyway. We'll just go look. And what I have discovered in a pretty small sample size, right, trying a few things, is that the advantage Ancestry seems to have in the cases that I've looked at is the search just works a lot better. Their indexing is a lot more thorough, and the way you do search, though there are things about it that drive me nuts, the way their search works seems to be more effective. It returns results a lot more reliably. And on Family Search, looking for the same record for the same person, a record that I know exists, I have had, in a lot of cases, trouble finding it because the indexes are not complete or just not there yet. So where we find ourselves, we're at a bit of a crossroads about the records because this whole stream, the whole idea of this stream is still an experiment, right? And we don't know if we're going to get a big following on Twitch. I was watching some of my favorite streamers last week have a conversation about how I think they said that if you can average 15 viewers per stream, which would be a crazy dream for me. That's nuts to think that we could average 15. We average under 2 right now. Right? So, like, that would be nuts. But if you can average 15, which is a pretty small number, it places you in the top 1% of all streamers on Twitch. And that's like the crazy popular people playing really well-known video games and all of that. So I had kind of hoped that we could average 2 or 3, 4 or 5, something like that. It would be really nice to be able to average 3 and get to 50 followers and get affiliate status, only because that allows me to offer more functionality in the chat that makes the chat more engaging and fun. I don't care about any of the monetization. I'm not in it for that. But it would be nice to be able to grow the channel to at least that. But I have no idea whether we're going to be able to do that. And what the conversation turned to was it reminded me that the way this is supposed to work is, and the way that the best very small streamers and the ones I watch that are just starting out that I support, the way that that works is that they are on the stream doing something that they enjoy, doing something they really love, playing their favorite game, and they're throwing it out on Twitch to see who wants to join. And maybe it's just them and their own friends. Like, hey, let's just, and in the pandemic especially, lovely way to be connected virtually. And so what they're doing is the important thing there is they are doing something that they really enjoy for several hours that they'd probably be doing anyway, and just hitting a button that allows it to be broadcast to people that want to watch. Which, if you go look in the currently live, you'll see a lot of people with 0 viewers, 1 viewer, 2 viewers, 3 viewers. That would be great, right? And so what I discovered, to bring it all back to, free sources, is the last couple weeks, what I have discovered since our free trial expired is that I have neither the viewer base nor am I doing something that I love. Working in Ancestry free version sucks. I don't like it. I can't imagine that anybody would use it other than as a springboard to figuring out which subscription to get and getting that. There's no good reason to do that. And then I thought, well, what about alternate sites on the web where we could do something similar? And we played around with that on the previous stream, or maybe the one before that. We did a little bit of looking around on the big giant family search family tree. And we've also talked about Wikitree. And so we talked about those as potentially being alternatives, right? So here's, oops, sorry. Developer mode. We've talked about those as being potentially alternatives. And my struggle with Family Search and Wikitree is that both of those are shared public trees that I can't use as a sandbox. I can't just go fling my hypotheses and research and just build out the tree with lots of stuff without being sensitive to the fact that other people on Family Search and Wikitree, other people are in those same profiles. There are other people that are potentially more closely related to those individuals than I am, in the sense that maybe that's a closer to their own family. They may know some of those, they may have a descendant who remained close to those relatives. They may care more about a particular profile than I do. If a profile's just kind of, I'm using it to get back and do more research. In any case, I have found it challenging to just use Family Search's family tree as a substitute for what I can do in Ancestry. It's not quite the same. So overall, what I think I'm probably going to do to keep the stream going for a while and see if we can build up viewers is to see if we can use. I'm gonna use whatever sources I want, and that's gonna sometimes be here we go. That's gonna sometimes be this paid version where we've talked about. I've already built this tree, right? So let's go here. Here's Harry Hammond in this tree. Ta-da! And we're going to pull that down and obscure all the living people. That makes it a little trickier, right? I'm going to have to be more careful and more thoughtful about how I still don't want to show a lot of information about living people on the stream, because that's a privacy issue that I do care about this is my family, right? And me. So we're going to bounce around, and I'm kind of going to do this the way I want. I think of this as akin to the folks that are playing video games on Twitch. Most of those are not free video games. I just went and looked at what it would cost to buy me the desktop version of the game that I play, and it's kind of expensive. So, it's not as much as what I pay for Ancestry, but geez, it's actually probably more than the base level, like the base US Ancestry subscription. A lot of these games cost money. So anyway, I don't feel bad about it. What I want to do, though, is I want to make sure we retain that spirit on the stream of the interactivity that I want to do. That, I think, is going to come second. I'm going to do the stuff I love, the way I enjoy doing it, and let the audience come and see. And for all of you, whenever any of you are joining the stream, I would love for you to be active in chat, and I would really love to hear from you about what you want to see and what you're finding interesting, because we can absolutely jump around and look at trees and look at records and search any of these sites. And I am committed to making sure that when we're helping do research for any of you, that we're going to try to do it in a way that it's not going to be, it doesn't make any sense for me to have strangers' trees locked up in my private ancestry account under my membership. That is ridiculous. So what we'll try to do is extend out to how can we get this stuff on WikiTree, which again is just for sharing. It doesn't itself have the sources unless people have put them there. Or we will get them out here on Family Search, which has the best of both, right? It's a buildable, shareable tree, and it also has a lot of the primary sources that we can attach, and we can do the sort of whole deal with the ancestry facts, and like ancestry, we can tie the sources to the fact. It does that. It's just it's a little clunkier, which might be a way of saying I don't know how to do it as well. Anyway, so when we are talking about your research and your tree, I'm still super committed to making sure that we do it in a way that you can reproduce and that you can take forward, that you're learning how to do the research that you want to do. Um, and I will rely on you to tell me what you want in that regard, show up in the chat, ask your questions, and we'll dig around together. As yet another reminder, that's why I'm here doing it this way instead of going on YouTube, where what I mean by on YouTube is I'm not pre-recording videos that are tutorials that I'm going to edit and just present as a one way with maybe some comments at the bottom. The whole point of this is to see if it makes sense to do this research and engage with the chat. And that's going to allow you to shape and direct the conversation, to talk about the things that you want to talk about. So once I kind of find my love for being on the stream with little or no, few people, so that you all don't have to show up every week. You don't need to do that. Once we figure out that equilibrium of what do I want to spend 2 hours doing, whether anybody's watching or not, then we can kind of work on growing the channel from there. And I am working on some of the tooling in the background, setting up a broadcast, the OBS, and getting some more interesting stuff on the screen. I am going to try for next week to have, we do it next week? We may do next week. It may be the week after. I'm going to try to see if I can set up a puppy cam so you all can watch the dogs. And we're going to just do some more experimental stuff. But I think I've got to get the fundamentals down of what is this activity that I'm going to do on the stream, and do I like it? Right? So, do I like it enough to do it when you're not here? Right now, that hasn't been true. So, hey, thank you to those of you that are here. I love that. I'm happy to have you. And let's go. Let's go. Let's go do this. Let's do it. So, any requests? Who wants to do stuff today? We got, so there are viewers. There's a viewers list. I can see who you are. Whoa, that's super cool. Okay, sorry, new feature. Didn't know that was there. That's so great. Yeah, what do you want to work on? So what we've had, I'm just going to keep talking until stuff shows up in the chat. So what we've had up to this point, I talked about how we have the Hammond line, the Hammond name, going back to Puritan New England, with the original ancestor, our original immigrant ancestor, Benjamin Hammond. So we've got that guy. Wait, here, we've got that in this tree. Here, if we go to this guy, if we go to Eugene, we can see where we've pretty much just worked on. Here, we go to home guy. Here we have Harry Harvard Hammond. That's our starting guy. And you will notice that we've done a lot of work. If you go kind of on ancestry, if you go up, right, or to the left. Wait, to the left, that's yours. Quick review. Where you've gone in the last few. Yep. Hey, look, where we've gone in the last few weeks of the Hammond tree. Yes. Yes, absolutely. So here we are. We have researched. We started with just Harry and building out the family of Eugene and Ella, his parents, because we got to that pretty quickly in the census. And then then Eugene and Ella were living in the household with Honeywell and Emily. So they had this 3-generational household. And when we got to Honeywell and Emily, Honeywell was originally the mystery, and we looked at Emily actually opened up first. That was the first thing that we found good information about. And you will notice that that's because that was Emily's history came from a book about the Shumway family, which means her paternal line. So she's a maternal ancestor for me, or a maternal ancestor for Harry or for Eugene. Anyway, she's that way. But once we found a bunch of information about her, it was on the paternal line because so much of genealogy is written about surnames and paternal lineage. A lot of it written by dudes, boring, right? But the name Shumway being carried down through all these male line ancestors. So once we found her, what we found was a bunch of her male line ancestors. We went all the way back to her original immigrant ancestor, who is Peter Shumway. The book says he's from France. The book is full of it. He's from England. But whatever, they do that. And what you'll notice that's so interesting in the shape of this tree is that we've got this pattern that just repeats and repeats and repeats, which is the paternal lines are fairly easy to open up and go on my tree. That's not always true. The Honeywell Hammond tree was a brick wall for me for years. So, but a lot of these other paternal lines, because once you tap into a surname that has been studied, then that surname goes to lots of other stuff. Oh, how do I know that Peter Shumway is from England and not France? Thank you for asking that. I'm going to say some of that is just hubris, but I will also say the reason I think he's from England and not France is that he immigrated. Do we have that here or is it in the book? It's in the book. We didn't pull any of this over. He was in the late 1600s in Massachusetts. Massachusetts was almost entirely settled by migrants from England. He didn't come over during the Puritan Great Migration. So I will allow that maybe I'm not as confident about that. But he lived in an area that was very solidly settled by English migrants. And if he had come over, there were other parts of North America that French migrants were tending to go to. So you got your waves of the Scotch-Irish migrants who went to the south of went to Virginia and into what is now the southern U.S. You've got like Spanish and Portuguese European migrants who went to what is now Central and South America, right? And they tended to go with their countrymen. Scandinavians came over at various times and went to, there's the New Amsterdam colony in New York, and there's the New Sweden colony in Pennsylvania and Delaware. And you can see when you track these different lines, and I've done various research on those, that they tended to go with their country persons. So if someone was coming over direct from France to North America, it's way more likely that they would have gone to Quebec because that's where the French people were. Imagine that this is someone who is French speaking and is he going to come over completely by himself and go to a place where he doesn't speak the language and doesn't know anybody? It's not impossible. There are people who did that, but here's the other side of it. If a French speaking person from France who didn't know anybody back in the home country showed up in Topsfield, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston, I think. I should check how far, or if it's out towards Worcester. It's in eastern Massachusetts, which is a heavy-duty Puritan stronghold. Could he have been a French Protestant? Absolutely. There were French Protestants. They were fleeing France like crazy. But they tended to be in French Protestant communities. And would he have come over and been welcomed into a Puritan church in Essex County, Massachusetts? Maybe. But if he was, somebody would have said something. They would have said something. He would have had this nickname, Peter from France, right? Or something would have probably been written about it. Given that this is an area where it is really, really well documented, right? Really well documented. So there's lots of people writing diaries. There's lots of town records. The town records are chatty. They keep a lot of information about who's doing what. This is part of why that part of the country is so easy to research, is that it's so well documented. And so it seems to me that if he were from a different community, speaking a different native language, if he had a funny accent, if he came over at a different time, that would to me have been noteworthy. And so somebody in his contemporary time and place would have noticed, hey, this, and they would have done it something real simple, like, hey, we had to get to know this guy, we had to admit him to our church, like how all would that have gone, as opposed to what he did, which was he seamlessly fit into the society. He was probably made a freeman in the town. He probably joined the church. He had a very ordinary migrant life, and raised his kids and so on and so forth. And so it is not very likely that he was a foreigner. It is possible. I can't say it's impossible, but this is people coming over from England in droves at this point, and it's way more likely that he would have come over with a ship full of people from England. Could he have been from a family that migrated from France into England at some point? Absolutely. Totally plausible, right? We know that there were Normans and there was, England owned part of the land that is now France for a long time. Could there have been crossover? And that's where the only basis we had for the book thinking that he was French is that they think Shumway sounds French. It maybe does, but it doesn't not sound English. And the word way is English. Could that have been, OUE with a thing over it like French? Sure, but it could have just as easily been English. So that's my justification. I make those kind of throwaway comments, but it also goes back to we've talked about all those family books that were written in the 1800s, and it was super popular at the time for families to have a lineage book written about their surname. And the whole point is you try to take it back as far as you can go, and then you talk about the glorious ancestry that your family had in the old country. And there's some interesting sort of status and racialized reasons why having a lineage in the correct old country was really important to people at that time. And that's all complicated. But the fact is, for a lot of these families, we don't actually know exactly where they came from. We don't know where they migrated from in England. We don't know what their family was like in England. And it was really tempting, and you'll see a ton of this when you look at the old family books. So part of this is I've seen probably 100 of these, is that they don't know. There isn't a record of when exactly they arrived or where exactly they were born or where they came from. There just is. We haven't found it yet. In the 1800s, certainly it was much more difficult and more expensive to do that research, so we don't know. And yet you've got the Daughters of the American Revolution and the Mayflower Society kind of talking about how, like, we're super high status because we can trace our ancestry back to England. And so there's a lot of desire to be able to do that. And one of the things that you'll see hundreds of books do is that they will simply find the existence of any family at all in England that has either the same name or a very similar name, and they'll say, that must be it. That's it. That's them. And in the more rigorous parts of genealogy, we are trying harder to actually have a record trail that goes from, but is it that family? Are we sure? How do we know? What is the record that's proving it? And you'll find that Robert Charles Anderson's Great Migration series, there are so many profiles in that book that he says, we've looked, we don't know. We don't know where they came from. We don't know. We know their age because we know approximately how old they were when they died, and they have a death record in North America. Right? So, but other than that, we don't know. So there's a lot of those that are kind of a stretch. But it would be interesting to see if even just did the name Shumway exist in England at all, and how common was it? Was it really rare? Was it really uncommon? Was it very common? Were there multiple counties that had Shumway clusters, or just one? Because you can narrow that research down. I don't actually know if there's a modern Shumway society doing that work or not. I haven't seen it. Curious now whether WikiTree might tell us. I'll go to Grandpa Harry here, and we'll go to his family tree, and we'll go up the Shumway line, because you get up into the Shumways, and because of the existence of that book, all of these Shumway records, well, not this one, but a lot of these Shumway records here on, were created and are managed by other people. These were already here when I got there, right? This record was created on WikiTree in 2012, right? And so we've got, I wonder, how do we know? Yep. See, look, we've got all the alternate spellings here. speculation that he may. Chamois family. No, I don't know. See, I don't buy it. I don't. No, I don't think so. Aha, see, he was in a court record. Aha, he was in a court record, and his age was given in 1695. Oh, and his death was after? Before. Okay, fine. Fine. So notice how much of this is speculation, right? So, a lot of speculation about this guy. Anyway, so that's, I don't think it's French. I am open to evidence of being wrong. Totally open to it, right? If we find stuff, that'll be great. I think it's not likely. That is all. Oh, hey, look, is that me? Did I do that? Is there any evidence that he was a Huguenot? Yes, that was me. I do this a lot. You will see me on Wikitree doing this a lot. Hey, where's the evidence? Right, so you can actually go read this. Here, I'll throw this link in the chat. You can go read my argument. That was my argument back in 2017. There. It says, a Huguenot settlement was in Massachusetts. So, see, I was already a little bit wrong. There. There. See, so there's evidence and counter evidence. Hey, pretty cool. So you can read kind of how the other folks on Wikitree have responded to it as well. A lot of the stuff that I've tried to learn has come from having conversations. This Wikitree, the G2G forum, is one of my favorite places to interact with other people who know how to do this stuff. I have learned so much about how to be a better researcher. And as you have heard already on the channel, I'm a really skeptical researcher. That's my jam. I really like evidence. I really get, nowadays I'm more amused rather than testy about evidence that is bogus. But wow, it's so interesting how much out there is bogus. There are some lines in one of my family trees, but I don't remember which one right now, that actually go back to, there was a dude in the 1800s who was there were several. There were a couple who were particularly well known for writing fraudulent genealogies, like just straight up made this stuff up. And people who don't recognize Anjou, and I can't remember the other guy now at the moment. There's two that are big names in genealogical fraud. And those things still get around because they get copied online and people don't realize that they've been absolutely disproven, right? There's a lot of stuff that's been disproven, but it still goes around. So you have to, I feel that I want to be skeptical of it and I want to go find out, okay, how do we know this thing? So, taking us on back to, again, kind of, here's the thing I think is so interesting about the way these trees sort of build themselves out, is we've got Emily Shumway. We found some information about her, a maternal person, but as soon as we started building out her tree, the direction that it took us was up a male line. And notice how that leaves us all of these little twigs going off that are these women that we have not yet explored, right? Same kind of thing here. We get up to Antipas and Beulah. We had a great time locating Honeywell as the child of Antipas and Beulah, and some really miraculous records that we found on Family Search. They weren't findable. We didn't find them via Ancestry originally, where we discovered that Antipas and Beulah had migrated from Whitingham, Vermont, where Honeywell was probably born, to Genesee County in New York, in upstate New York, where Antipas died relatively young and left a bunch of minor children who then had a guardianship record. And so it actually named their mother Beulah, their father Antipas. They were going in guardianship to a guy named Luther Blodgett, who turns out to be Beulah's brother, right? Because presumably, we don't have the death record for this, but the guardianship occurred in 1821. So we would assume that Antipas passed away, Beulah's raising the kids by herself for a few more years. She then also passes away probably around 1820, and the children have to go to another family, and that has to be handled through the courts because they've got to have legal guardianship. The older sister, Sophronia, goes to one family, and the four younger children, Honeywell, Lewis, Alonzo, and Abigail, all go to the Luther Blodgett family. This is in a time period where they're not listed by name in the census, so we don't know what happens to them. And Abigail and Alonzo, I've not found any further record of. Lewis and Honeywell moved together to Iowa, and that is how we made that connection back. Was because Aunt Pam, who is on the stream today, said that found Lewis Hammond's records in the cemetery, and without that, we would not have opened up any of this whole tree. But we find Beulah. There's a Blodgett book. It's fantastic. It's free. It's on archive.org. We used that. We can go do the Blodgett book to build out her paternal line. Benjamin, Joseph, Thomas, Samuel, and Thomas. The original Samuel and Thomas were the original immigrant ancestors. They are super cool because that's probably the first example in my tree where Thomas Blodgett, we actually do have his information about his origins in England. And we have at least a couple generations back further in England. So we see like where his ancestral home is. So Thomas Blodgett, I think, is a super cool family. I know. Okay, fine. So you have someone who lied on their census. But remember, when we started in this journey, Harry Hammond lied on a lot of his census records too, right? Pam's dad was a cheeky dude. And he lied about his age. He didn't lie about where he came from. And it turns out he told the truth about who his parents were, which is nice. That did help. But I thought it was hilarious that he lied about his age so much. Anyway, so we have, again, here we have the Rebecca Haynes line that is just a little twig that we've not followed. Here on the Hammond line, we have Rachel Winslow, Abigail Swift, Elizabeth Honeywell, Mary Vincent. We have all these maternal lines that are, if we explore a maternal line and we find something exciting about a maternal line, it is typically because her paternal line got written about. Oops, my bad, I hit the mouse. There. And so but, to bring it all back to how great maternal lines are. Oh, and we've left Ella Wilcox. We just never did anything with Ella Wilcox. There she is. She's hanging out, right? And I let the trial run out. So I now have all these glorious hints for Ella Wilcox, but they're all obscured here because we don't have a, they're all obscured. It's so frustrating, right? And we can't attach any of them to the tree. So, oh, that's not her though. Okay. All right, so frustrating. If we click this, it's going to invite us to subscribe to a thing. Super frustrating. So that's where we've left the tree, is that we've done kind of the easy path. As we've worked our way back the tree, we do the easy path on any of these people. And for any given line that we want to research, the easy path is typically going to be, it is more likely to be on a paternal line because that's where, right? Exactly. And Blodgett is a maternal line for somebody, but we quickly run into it's the men who are better researched. There's an interesting dynamic you'll see in some of those family surname books where sometimes they do a full profile of the daughters of those families and they talk about the children that they had who have a different surname. And there are other times where the book, depending on the focus of the book and what the author wanted to do, just whack, just chops off all the daughters and says they existed. They married this guy. We do not care about the rest of their family or their descendants. And it's so funny how you just realize that mathematically that means like maybe half of the tree, half of their descendants are not described in a book because they didn't have the correct surname or only color. It's really interesting when you start from the top with your original immigrant ancestor, but you only follow the son's lines down because you're only tracking the surnames. And think about how many of those branches you just completely cut off, right, on the way down. Other books do a better job of tracing all the people with the different surnames, which is why, like the Hammond, not the Hammond book, the Crossland book that my aunt is well familiar with. That's Harry's wife, Edward Crossland Smith, descended from a family of Crosslands, but she and her children are in the Crossland book because they are descendants of the Crossland family, even though she was a couple generations removed from the Crossland surname, right? I don't even remember. I don't remember it off the top of my head. It's all in the tree, right? But the Crossland book continued to trace the female ancestors, right? Catherine Crossland was my grandmother's grandmother. And so they continued to trace the descendants of Catherine Crossland who married a Smith. And so we have some Smiths, and then they continued to trace, even though that Smith married a Hammond. We're a couple, steps removed from the Crossland surname now. But the book says that's a legit descendant of the Crossland clan. Let's do it, right? And it's in the book. So it varies quite a lot. But we talked last stream about a really cool thing that you can do with maternal lines when you pair those with a DNA record. You can do some stuff with a maternal line that gives you more information than what you would get from a paternal line. And we actually built out a tree for that, where we talked about, I think it looks better if we do it this way. Yes, right? We talked about how if you share DNA with somebody who is also descended from Benjamin Hammond and Elizabeth Honeywell, it doesn't tell you a whole lot yet, because they could be descended from any of, or if you share DNA with somebody who has the Hammond surname. If I find other Hammonds in the tree and I don't know how we're related, this is showing us that if we're following the sons down, those who kept the surnames, there are a lot of potential paths that relationship could take. And so if I know that I have some connection to Benjamin Hammond and Elizabeth Honeywell, which early on in this journey we thought that's what we got, right? We knew that I was connected probably, although the reason we knew it is because of the use of the name Honeywell. And I went and did Ancestry DNA, and sure enough, I found that I had connections to Benjamin, descendants of Benjamin and Elizabeth. You get that far back, and those were pretty tenuous connections. But the point is, in between here, this is all just a fuzzy cloud of, we don't know, I might not know how the other person is connected to them, and I don't know how I'm connected to them, because there are so many paths along the way that it could be. And the thing that helps us narrow it down is the power of the maternal line. Maternal lines are incredibly powerful, because if I were a descendant of Joseph Hammond and Hannah Dean, for example, there would be absolutely no reason to think that I would have any connection to anybody on the Blodgett's side, right? If I were descended through this path doesn't include any Blodgett's. Sometimes families intermarry, and it does, and it's complicated, and that's not what I'm talking about right now, because that's complicated. But let's say that if I were a descendant of Joseph Hammond and Hannah Dean, then I would expect to have some DNA in common with people on the Dean line, and not have DNA in common in particular with people on the Blodgett line. But what happened for me was the reverse of that, of course, is that we found that I and Aunt Pam we share DNA with other descendants of this Blodgett family, which is here. The only reason that would make any sense is if somebody Blodgett married somebody that we are related to. Now, the fact that Pam and I both share DNA with Blodgetts and the same Blodgetts, that tells me a useful thing, because it tells me that the connection is on my paternal side, because that's how I'm related to Pam. All right. So we now know that I don't have Blodgett. Well, I might, but I'm not. That DNA is not coming from my mom. That's half of my tree that I can rule out. Yay. It's on my paternal side. And then we can go narrow down. Yes, we can go do more research on the Hammonds and find out how many Hammonds did marry Blodgetts on that line, right? And as we go along, I'm also going to look for, okay, I've got some relatives on the Blodgett side. Do I also share DNA with Haynes? If I share DNA with Haynes, that's a stronger link to this couple. And we can also start to look at, we knew that Beulah had at least one brother. It turns out she has like 6 or 7 siblings, right? We can start to look at, do I share DNA with descendants of her siblings? And then what about Rebecca Haynes? Do we know who Rebecca Haynes's parents are? And do I share DNA with them? And tracing those maternal lines narrows it down to, which person with this surname am I descended from? And that is a power that the maternal lines give you that the paternal line by itself does not. So I get real excited about what you can do with that. That is, I've been pestering Abe about that because I think on the height line, we can find that I think we said that the height book gave us a hint that you're probably related to one of the lines that's in the height book, right? And we are trying to figure out how and where and which one. And so the one of the things that I think is interesting then is that you can start to just build out. It's a little bit like they show these snippets of it on Long Lost Family is the one that I watch, right? The TLC one where they're reuniting adopted people. They show snippets of how they triangulate with DNA that I'm still trying to learn how that works. But one of the things that they do is that they'll just okay, hey, we're connected to this ancestor. We're going to build that entire ancestor's tree all the way out with everything that we know about them. And we don't yet know, you are still off here somewhere. We don't yet know where you fit in this tree. But as we start to find out what are the maternal surnames in the descent of this Height family, how many maternal surnames are there? Are they super interwoven in a way where we're going to have 5 or 6 lines that are all plausible? Or are they pretty clean where like this dude married one family and his brother married a different family? And as we get those, we can start to look for what DNA do you share on which maternal lines? Are there any connections in any of those places? We can't still, for you, rule out crazy things like non-paternal events, I suppose, right? I think you've said you've done your Y DNA and so forth. So we're trying to just figure out, we're trying to just narrow down of this giant broad tree, where do you fit? And I do find DNA really helpful for that. And again, it's looking at not just the surnames that you know, but what about the surnames that we don't know yet? And then how do we then connect once we know kind of which family to look at, right? That was what we did with this Hammond family here, is that once we had a pretty good idea that out of I'm going to say maybe there was a dozen Hammond lines. Okay, no idea yet. Out of about a dozen Hammond lines that I could have probably been descended from. I am going to go back here and look at this, right? Out of all of these possible Hammond lines, home person, there we go. We're going to go back up here. Yeah, out of all of these Benjamin and Elizabeth lines, we'll look at his tree. So this is what, here, just make that big. We're doing big screen on purpose. Can everybody see? You can see that well enough, right? Okay, let me know. I'm experimenting with a different screen share. So if it makes the text too small to see and you care about that, let me know. Yeah, see, triangulation and GEDmatch, that's an interesting thing that I think we could explore on the stream at some point is like, I don't know how to do that. I've never done it. I've done it on Ancestry. And what I call triangulation, I don't think is actually what a proper genetic genealogist actually does. I'm doing some very poor man's, I've made some stuff up kind of exercises here. But what we did in building out this sample tree was that I took, we know that my ancestor's name is Honeywell. We can't figure out how he's connected to Benjamin and Elizabeth, but boy, that last name is pretty tantalizing. And now what we have is we've got this fairly big tree. Oh, and we know that since his surname is Hammond, we're pretty sure it's a paternal line connection, right? We're pretty sure that's where we're coming from. But to start with, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sons, all of whom had sons. And that's a lot. That becomes overwhelming very quickly because knowing no other information, right? At this point, we didn't know anything about Antipas, that surname, that given name in the tree. So any of these people, and boy, they liked their odd names, right? But any of these male line could have been my Hammond ancestors in the middle of that Hammond sandwich. And so what we wanted to do was use every trick we could think of to narrow down who do we want to research more thoroughly. Me dropping all of those names into the tree took me less than an hour, right? Just boom, 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 boom. I just want to visualize. I want to see everybody. I want to see everybody. I don't care about all these stupid hints. I'm not going to go dig in deep on them until I find a reason. But what I'm looking for is reasons. Why would I find that is interesting? I built this out of the Hammond book, which was free on archive.org. Can't read the name. Well, no, right now they're too tiny. Right now they are very tiny. But what I want you to see is the sea of blue. Those are all blue people with the Hammond surname. If I blow those back up a little bigger, and I can actually zoom in even a little more, we can see I did a thing, again, to kind of try to visualize that, for example, when we build out this tree and we get into the grandsons of Benjamin and Elizabeth, right? We've now got, this is the complete list of all the known grandsons. It doesn't rule out that there might be people that the book didn't know about. Some of these are lines that are kind of lost. But when we get into the list of all the known grandsons, the first thing that I did was I went through and I marked the names of all of them who didn't leave descendants that we know of. Right? So died young. This one died in infancy. Definitely we can be confident did not leave descendants, right? So we can knock those out. I could, if I wanted to maybe visualize it differently, I could delete them from the tree. But this way I know that I didn't overlook them. I just know that they didn't have descendants that we know of. So these are, I would only come back and look at them after I exhausted all. I would not look at the infants. But the ones who lived into adulthood and it said they didn't leave any descendants, that would be interesting. Given that our ancestor carries the Hammond family name, the likelihood of this being an illegitimate child of, would they have had the Hammond surname? Maybe. Right? Did he have unrecorded children, or were the records just bad and he perfectly well had children and we don't know about it? I don't know. The ones who died in infancy, I feel good about. These two died very young. There were sisters on that line. That doesn't help me because I carry the Hammond surname. So I can pretty much rule those out. Illegitimate child of a Hammond daughter who took the Hammond surname. Plausible, not very likely. I would only come back and do that as a last resort. So in looking at just the grandsons on this line, we find the interesting thing that only one of Benjamin's sons named a child after Honeywell. Named a child, and in fact named a child Honeywell. And we originally looked at this and said, whoa, is that the same guy? But he's much too old. Whoa, is that his father? Apparently not. Didn't leave any descendants. So we then go look at, well, what about these other lines that also left sons? Did any other branches of the family use the name Honeywell? And it turns out, conveniently enough, that the only branch of the family that used the name Honeywell that we know of is, in fact, this guy, Antipas. And once they got started using it, they used it several times. They used it more than once. So we have this Honeywell. We mentioned in the book there's a Honeywell Haskell because it's one of the daughters. So like this guy, Antipas, was into naming children Honeywell. His family did that as a tradition. That meant really quickly I can narrow down Jared didn't leave any children, Honeywell didn't leave any children. That leaves us Joseph and Benjamin. I now have, instead of dozens of grandsons to look at, I have two. And I can go dig through their lines and look, Benjamin has two sons who left descendants, one who didn't. Joseph has two sons who Antipas left descendants. We don't know about Stephen. So now I'm to 4. And then that gives me just a narrower field of research. So that's the kind of thing. So Abe and I, hi Abe, we've been chatting offline. We've been chatting in email about some of the research that you've been doing on your family and working on the height line. And I just see so many interesting little parallels to the challenges that I faced in working on the Hammonds, including the fact that it was a named paternal line. So we're dealing with name. You have the added challenge of complexity of height having all those different spellings potentially, right? So We have how you have it spelled today, but then there are a number of other spellings, and we know that it's likely that it would have been misspelled in records as well. And that's going to make record searches harder. Hammond, I'm really fortunate that Hammond was rarely misspelled. The handwriting gets a little butchered. And sometimes they drop the D, and sometimes there's an extra A. But when it gets misspelled, it's misspelled in a way that an ancestry search is still pretty good at recognizing. This is a good time to talk a little bit maybe about, heck, I have lost the word. There's a word for the type of genealogy search that we do that is dealing with the different pronunciations, and I can't think of the word. So one of you knows, and you can help me. Yes, everyone likes to misspell it, even the people at Starbucks. Yes, exactly, right? Because it's challenging. It's one of those good, I would say, like one of those good, is it English? It's probably English. And it's got that English quality of there are a million ways to spell it. And as soon as you get back past type, or earlier than typewriters, right? People get a little worked up in genealogy about finding the one true spelling of a name. It's actually mentioned in Peter Shumway's profile, right? Look at in the 1600s and 1700s when it was all handwriting. You got to understand that people in that era were not emotionally attached to correct spelling the way those of us who were raised with spelling bees and grades for spelling, the way that was drilled into us. I actually am a little fanatical about spelling in my normal English speaking life. I try not to be judgy of others, but I like to get it right when I can. But you have to be able to like emotionally let go of that. Oh, likely Scottish. Yeah, okay. Scottish is plausible and good. And then again, all bets are off, right? Uh, yeah. So Shumway was spelled a bazillion different ways, and that's part of why, like, the idea of it being an anglicized version of a French name is not ridiculous. It's not totally out of the question, but you can see where all of these different variations of the name. I'm not sure it's accurate to say that there was one true spelling of it even at the time. Like, no one cared. They cared how it was pronounced. And they wrote it down in such a way that if you were reading that document, and you knew at the time, you'd know who they were talking about. And that's about as good as they felt like they needed to be back then. And so that can make it very difficult because it gets really loose when you get back into handwritten documents. And even if the handwritten document was attempting to spell it the same way we spell it today, you've also got the handwriting hurdle to get over. Something to think about with census records is that oftentimes the census records were either the census taker writing down what they heard, and so they might write it phonetically. They may or may not have had the person reporting the information spell it to them. That person may have had varying degrees of literacy or ability to spell. And the informant in a census record may be the person who carries that name, or it may be another member of their household, depending on the makeup of their household. So you may have, like with death certificate often is only as good as the informant that filled out the information, that provided the information, and sometimes they don't know. Or they know something that is incorrect. So all of that goes into, and then you've got that, like I said, handwriting, the transcriptions, the indexes. Soundex, that's the word I wanted. Soundex is a thing that's used in genealogy where we are attempting to bridge the ways that different names are pronounced the same but maybe spelled very differently, and teaching a computer how to recognize that HAIGHT is the same name as HITE. If you were just comparing using what you can visually see or the similarity of the characters in the alphabet, those don't look like the same name. And so Soundex is one of the technologies, I think we have many now, but is a common thing that's used by genealogists to reduce the name down to how is it pronounced, and then can we use that to compare it across to others that are pronounced the same way. And then you have the extra complexity of if it's misspelled and you're trying to guess how that misspelled thing might have been pronounced, you may get the wrong pronunciation. What I'm finding is that, and this wasn't always true, but it is more true more recently, is I'm finding that ancestry searches seem to be a little bit better at bridging across the different spellings, misspellings, pronunciations, mispronunciations. Oh gosh, you also have things like this happened with our Honeywell, actually. Um, Not only the mistakes that might be made because of pronunciation, but also Honeywell, because he had letters in his name that look similar. So, how might it be misread? How might it be misread? So if you can imagine, I do this because I sign my name with M's and N's and stuff repeated in it all the time because I'm Hammond. But Honeywell has UNN something W. And depending on how somebody's handwriting looks, that can actually all look like the same letters. Some of those might look like R's, the double N might look like an M, but it also might look like 5 U's in a row, because it depends on how bumpy they make the ends versus how spiky they make them, right? Or if the U has a roundy cursive-y thing after it. So you get into where this just looks like a bunch of bumps and they're indistinguishable and you maybe can't even tell which one belongs to which letter. And then what does Soundex do with that? No idea, right? And zeroing in on the fact that Honeywell was the name, actually we didn't land on that until we discovered that there was a person with the surname Honeywell, and that person and their family is somewhat well documented. We said, oh, that's probably what that is, right? It didn't have to be. That turned out to be what it was, but it wasn't a given. So Height has more of a problem with that. Yes, exactly. Hoyt. Oh gosh, Hoyt. Oy. Yeah. See? And so look at Hoyt and Height next to each other, kind of sound similar, but they don't look the same at all. And Lordy, again, who knows how a census taker is going to spell it? So you have a lot of challenges. Um, yeah, yeah. Yes, Dad used to say his family was, well, maybe. Yeah, see, Pam, I don't. Yeah, well, you would have more of the Hammond. You have more of the Hammond DNA than I do, because mine's more diluted than yours. Um, and yet that's possible, right? I don't actually know how much your dad knew about his ancestry. I mean, he knew his parents. He lived with them for many, many years. He lived with his grandparents when he was a child. Um, Now, none of them were recently French, so they wouldn't have retained any kind of an accent or anything. They'd been in North America for more than 100 years by that point, but well over 100 years, actually. Almost 200 years. 200 years. So it's not like they would have been noticeably French. But they may very well have. And in fact, think about that he's in the early 1900s, after those Hammond books were written. And I think after the Shumway book was written. So it's totally possible. If you think about your mom who got a copy of the Crossland book, right? And she read the Crossland book and it says all the things that it says about the Crosslands. Grandma Emily there may very well have had a copy of the Shumway book. It was written while she was still living, I believe. Right? And so if she thought she was French because that book said so and told him, then they may have, like, some of that word of mouth. This is what's really interesting, is there are folks, your ancestors in the 1800s and even the 1700s may have been told things by their parents, grandparents, or they may have actually read their own family history in a book that didn't come from people they know, but came from their own research. And that book may have been correct or it may have been wrong. We actually find this there's a really interesting story that I will go way too deep on in one of these streams, about how I know that Benjamin Hammond's parents were not William and Elizabeth, even though 2 different books say that they were. Those 2 different books are wrong. I've done the research. But it actually has to do with the fact that a great grandchild in the 1700s read a book about some Hammond migrants that are not related to our family and got them confused with his own family and told a whole story about how his family was descended from this weird conglomeration of this other unrelated that family that we now know to not be related at all. And so you can actually watch him you can watch his writings in which you're like, oh, he's about to go make that error. Oh, he made that error. He got that wrong. And it's all stuff that we now know 200 years later was mistaken. But because he wrote it in the 1700s, and we can tell that he wrote it out of a misinterpretation of a book that existed at that time, and then he wrote it, and then his family books picked it up, and they were like, this is totally true. It's not. It's a mistake, right? It's not fraud. It's just a mistake. And that mistake got reproduced in 2 books, and then that's been handed down through the whole family. Nothing to do with France. That's just it's a different mistake. That's the of London mistake. It is. It's just a mistake. It's not not the end of the world. It's just that once that thing gets loose on the internet and people get emotionally attached to it, and they're like, "But he was William, the wealthy merchant from London." I'm like, no, never existed. There was no such person. No such person. Oh, and it's even harder when you are trying to disprove that a person ever existed because he didn't exist. It's just made up. Rather than saying, oh, look, it's the wrong person and here's the right person. It's tough because we don't have the right person to fill in. No. Abe, anything you want to work on? No. Because I'm going to keep talking about my family unless I have something more fun to do. But I think your family would be super fun to do. And then I think we're going to have to hop over and look at. Oh, I was going to see if I could make. Hang on a second. I'm gonna switch the screen for just a second because I'm gonna do a thing off screen. Don't mind me. I'm gonna try sharing this tree with myself so that I can maybe log into it from my other. Okay, good. Maybe I can log into it from my other account. But I still kind of want to work off of this tree because that might make it a little easier for me to not show living people, among other things. So let's do that. Yep, there it is. Maybe I've got this invite. Do I have an invite? No, not yet. Alrighty. See, so you're looking at my pretty face because I'm doing things like showing email on my screen, and you don't get to see my email. Anyway, so Abe. Yeah, okay. So you've been out of town. There you go. And there's there's Abe's email. That's cool. You've been invited to see the Hammond family tree. Yes, I would like to do that. Yes, I would. Hey, there it is. That's cool. Okay, good. That is great. Let's do that. All right, so now just do. Oh wait, no, not that. Hang on, I'm getting all my windows back up. There we go. We're gonna close that email. We're gonna close that screen there, and now we've got, okay, let's see what we can do here. So what we've done is, dink, we'll go back here. We have, I'll have to make this screen big. There. We have, I have invited myself on my paid account over to view the tree that we created for the stream. And so let's see if that does what I hoped it would do. Does that give me the ability? Yes, it does. That gives me the ability to work on that same tree, but taking advantage of the fact that I have the paid account and I can look at these records. The paid account that we are using is the US. Right now, we're only in US only. I happen to have the world one so that I can also look at international records. There are some branches of my family where that's been useful. I think the Blodgetts, because I can look at some of the English records. But for now, for the work that we're doing, we're still very solidly in North America, and the US, which of course costs less, is totally good enough. Totally good enough for what we would want to do. So it looks like we'll be able to look at records and add people and do cool stuff with the tree that we created for the stream, but still using kind of the improved access to records. So this is a good thing. The other thing we could potentially do, we haven't talked any about the tree for my mom, who is coming over in a couple hours. and is going to judge the messiness of my house. Um, and her tree is also like is interesting in a radically different way, as is the tree for my paternal grandmother, Pam's mom. Are you seeing my? No, you're not. Not anymore. No email. Okay. Um, the tree for Pam's mother is also interesting in a very different way because um, so what we're seeing in Harry Hammond's tree is that that dude is very solidly New England, descended from New England migrants, on English immigrants to New England, on so far every branch of his tree that we have yet discovered, and many others that I have discovered that you've not seen. All of them have been in the United States for a very long time, and they go back to the 1700s or 1600s and English ancestors to the Northeast who then migrated west. So that's pretty much the story of Grandpa's tree. I jokingly say, very New England blue blood. I don't know how much he knew that, but that's very solidly true. Grandma Eddie here, she has two completely different lines of ancestry. One of them is fairly recent Irish immigrants on her mother's side. Her mother's very Irish. And I have not been able to get back very far. I've not had great luck with. I've gotten back okay. I've done pretty well on that branch of the family. But recent Irish migrants, much different research story, much different resources that we use to research them. No, ain't nobody wrote a big voluminous book about the descent of these poor Irish immigrants who came over in the late 1800s. It just mid to late 1800s didn't happen, right? The potato famine folks not writing big fancy high status books about themselves. And the other half of her ancestry we touched upon, and we've mentioned it on other streams as well, is the Crossland ancestry. So where do I get the blue blood idea? Well, there actually are literal descendants of royalty in Grandpa's tree. So where do we get that? Where's that at? That is on his Swift line. I think we had a Swift on here. There are actually folks that you can trace far enough back into England to get on his line. We've got Mayflower and we've got English royalty. The royal ancestry books are back there, and we've got all the way back to the original signers of the Magna Carta, and those get you to Charlemagne. So the difference being, it is mathematically proven that all people of European descend from Charlemagne. It has to be true, apparently. They've done this cool math with it. Has to do with the number of descendants that somebody had and number of ancestors that we have. So, like, it's not that fancy. Like, all those poor Irish people are descended from Charlemagne, too. They're just poor and they can't prove it. So the difference is that his family retained enough of their literacy and economic status up and down over the generations and so forth, that a paper trail exists for those families that will get you back far enough in England to some really interesting stuff. And it's hard to get that paper trail sometimes because the peasant families maybe didn't have all those records, or they only had the church records and those are gone or whatever, right? And it's not super easy to get back to Mayflower because a lot of those, there's actually not that many surviving folks on the Mayflower who left descendants whose family lines haven't died out, but we happen to be descended from one of them. Yay. So that's cool. So I jokingly say New England blue blood, but like these were also prominent families in the original Puritan migration. These were folks who settled towns in New England, who were, held offices in their towns. They were, pillars of the community such as it was. I don't know if they were nice people or not, but they are very well documented because they had a lot of that sort of tradition, that they did a lot of the things that are traditionally valued in communities and that got written down. So I do joke about him being New England blue blood. A lot of his families do go back to, like, I was driving around in Rhode Island and I kept seeing buildings with the Maxon name on them. And Maxon is on the Mary Dana is in this tree. And you go back a little further, you get the Maxons. And they were one of the first settlers of Rhode Island. And like, holy cow, there's just a ton of stuff. Like there's so many people named Maxon in Rhode Island, and I suppose we're cousins with all of them. So some of these are some really prominent names as well. And on Eddie's side, we've got, so we talked about, we've got the, the poor Irish immigrants and that are hard to trace. And they, oh God, they all named their children Mary and Joseph, and so then that makes it really different. And they had just, the names are much more common. There were just a lot more humans alive at that time to all have the same name. It was easier in New England because they had not as many people with all the same names. Anyway, Grandma Eddie also has her other half of her ancestry is nicely documented on the Crossland side, and it is southern U.S. So all of her ancestors on that branch of her family, on the Crossland branch, they came over from mostly England, but at a time when it was, I mentioned Scotch-Irish folks were migrating at a later time post New England. She has, and it goes back to Revolutionary War times that came through Virginia. And so you can kind of visualize this map of like England, and that the proper English, right? Not the Scotch, Irish, Welsh, whatever, but the core English, ethnic English coming to New England. And those who came to New England tended to migrate west on a northerly path. There are some exceptions to that where some folks kind of went down into like Kentucky, but mostly, like with ours, it was Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, upstate New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, right? And that path just carried on across the north. I've seen that pattern in other families as well. Versus some folks from England, ethnically English, came through Virginia in early days. They tended to migrate to the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, right? And that was the line. In Grandma's case, they were South Carolina, North Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee. But it's so interesting how those lines of migration tended to go that way. And it has some to do with that they tended to migrate in these communities. There are groups that crossed over. There are groups of Quakers who would go from Pennsylvania down into Virginia, North Carolina. You'll find Quaker churches in North Carolina. Totally fascinating. And vice versa. There was very little crossover between Puritans in New England and the heathens in New Amsterdam, right? And the folks of Dutch descent. They tended to go a different direction. They didn't tend to mix that much. Although there is like this one community where some folks from Rhode Island got kicked out of their church and moved to New Jersey. And then they started encountering and crossing over with the folks from New Amsterdam. And they ended up in what is now West Virginia, because that's my stepfather's line. So that part is interesting. But you can kind of, oh God, Maryland. Oh, Maryland. Maryland is like it's where the research goes to die. The records in Maryland are so hard. I'm so bad at Maryland. I'm just bad at it. My mom has a group of her ancestors that go back to Maryland, and I just tear my hair out. It's just so difficult. So, Abe, you read about royal families in your tree and wiki tree. Are they accurate? Maybe. One of the problems with WikiTree is in the early days of WikiTree, it allowed people to upload their GEDCOM files pretty indiscriminately. So a lot of the things that are persistent errors online have been reproduced on WikiTree. But something I love about WikiTree is the projects. Projects are like my favorite thing. And I'm a member of a couple of projects. And so, where's the European Royals? So there's a European Royals project, Euro Aristo. And I am here to tell you, the people, the managers of this and like the hardcore members of the Euro Aristo project are really good at what they do. They're really good. I have learned a ton from working with them. Just even from, I'm not a member of this particular project, I don't think. but like the rigor that they have brought to this is it mentioned on the previous page that this was one of the original projects on WikiTree, was trying to clean up some of the spurious claims. And these folks work their butts off. Part of the reason I'm not in this project is it's a lot of work and I don't put that amount of time into it, but they're so good. They're so good. And so that is a thing where you can actually, I mentioned the G2G forums on WikiTree. If you go on the forums, if you have a specific question about, is this link from this person to this person, is this a valid link, you can go on to G2G and ask the question and tag Euro in the tags, and they will see it because they're following the tag. And someone will come in and look and maybe even give an opinion. It's pretty cool. Um, it helps the more narrowly you can focus your question, so that if you're saying like, "Hey, owls, good to see you. How hard do you reckon it would be to you do European family lines? You mean families that are in Europe today, owls? Thank you for joining, by the way. Happy Mother's Day. Um, so it's for, because I know you're in Canada. I don't know how long you've been in Canada, your people have been in Canada. The only Canadian genealogy that I've done so far is French Canadian. And I don't know, I don't know what your Canadian ancestry is. I just know you're in Canada. I just doxed you. I hope that's okay. Anyway, I don't know about other ethnic groups in Canada as well, although I will say that the records I have seen in Canada look juicy. It looks good. It looks like there's good data there. So I think we can broadly say, how hard is it to connect North Americans back to European ancestry? And then how hard is it to do proper European ancestry for people who are in Europe now? I can give you the answer of the closest my own. I'm only third generation Canadian. Nice. So the more recent, you have a real similar situation in Canada to what we did in the early days of the US genealogy that I did, which is your Canadian census records are pretty good. Especially more recently, but even going back a good ways. And so I have used some Canadian census records to trace some families, some Anglo families, not just French ones. The French Canadians have the extra special gift of the French church records are so good. They're just so thorough, and they've mostly been preserved, and you can mostly get them. They're just fantastic. So I have a cousin who I am related to on his paternal side, and I did his tree for him, both lines. So I did his maternal line, and it's French Canadian. He's Western Canadian, so maybe that's what it is. We're all Western reckoners here. But yeah, I think it would be probably not that difficult to get back to. You're in a similar situation to where I am, owls, on my maternal line, which is most of my maternal ancestors. I'm like third or fourth generation American on that side. Maybe I'm yeah, right. So my great grandfather came over from Poland in my case on my mom's side. Um, and those are kind of if it's in, like, there's sort of that boundaries. There are a couple boundaries of where different kinds of records were kept, and like the advent of mass use of typewriters makes a big difference, because it starts to become a lot easier to keep records and for them to be really readable, and kind of the rise of, like, if they migrated at a time when we were kind of bureaucratic about immigration, it means that there are typically good records. So like we were able to find the ship record that my great grandfather's family, and his whole family, siblings, all came over. I needed another relative who kind of knew the shape of that family, because I didn't. Just knowing his name was not enough to get me there. I needed to know. We had met a cousin who knew the parents' names and the siblings' names, but she didn't have the ship record. Armed with the names, I found the ship record. Because we kind of knew the time. That kind of stuff is out there. So getting enough breadcrumbs to get us to those, to find out, like, when did your people come over, and where did they come from? And then the question is, depending on where they came from, how well kept are the records there? So I have, I have done for my sweetheart's records. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, sweetheart's mom. Um, on his maternal side, there is a family named Key who came over from London fairly recently, within 3 or 4 generations. And it was super cool to go back and trace them to a time when a modern style census was being kept in London, because we found them in the London records living in Cockney London within the sound of the church bells. It's so cool. And he and his family, sweetheart and his extended family, went back to London on vacation, and I was able to actually tell them the Google Maps location of the place where the church used to be and the place where their apartment that they lived in used to be. And you can go see the like gentrified apartments that are there now, but like you can walk the street where their building used to be located, because there was a census that actually had their address. So that was amazing. So there are like the recent European records. We have another friend who came from relatively recent Swedish immigrants, and the Swedish village records are really, really thorough and pretty well preserved. So we can find, you get to Sweden, you have to learn how to do patronymics, and those will break your brain. But patronymics and village names and village nicknames and addresses, and you kind of piece all that together. There are people that are a lot better at that than me. But you can do a lot with that. So it's sort of, the answer is kind of depends on what community you are coming in from and what kinds of records are available in that community. Um, I will say that the Key family in England, we didn't trace them back into European royalty. They are just good, solid, regular working folks, which I love about them. And we did find the counties surrounding London, the little rural counties surrounding London that they originally came from. And you can kind of see that moment where they're like, there's no land left here. I got to move to the city to find work. And then they live in sort of, hopefully not squalor, I don't know, but they lived in some of the really poor districts in London. And then you could see them going, well, this kind of sucks, and everybody's drinking gin, and I'm out of here. I'm going to North America. And here they are. And they ended up in, where did they end up in? Iowa, I think, or Nebraska, right? And like lots of land at that time, and like let's get a homestead and do a farm, and turned into like, pillars of the community in Western Missouri. Super cool. Right? I love that whole journey. If you play around on, if you do DNA on Ancestry, by the way, you get some of those migration maps, which are really cool. Oh, Dutch. Oh, Dutch records are nice. So, um, the only all I know about Dutch records is New Amsterdam. They kept really good records. And Sweetheart has Dutch ancestry through New Amsterdam, and our friend who has Swedish ancestry also has Dutch, and my stepfather has Dutch. I have no Dutch at all. But I have done the North American Dutch ancestry. Love the church records a lot. The way that they tended to document things was really good. Um, Alice, do your folks come through New Amsterdam, or were they Dutch who went straight to Canada? And then German is a mixed bag because of all the different German principalities. I have 3 or 4 or 5 different lines of German in my tree as well, and some of them are brilliant and really easy to study, and some of them are hard, and it just depends on where in Germany and what nation or principality or whatever, what it was part of at the time that they were there, and what happened to it during the war. Right, some of those records were lost, although not as many as you might think. So both of those are pretty cool to research, and you can start by, like, for me, it's kind of the first wave that I do is, let's get back to the immigrants. Let's find where all the immigrants were. How did we end up in North America? And for some families, that's 3 or 4 generations back. There they are. That's them, right? And for others, like on the Hammond side here, it's like, oh, we're going to just keep on going. Um, Grandparents came here fleeing the Holocaust. Oh, wow. And they changed their name. I have Polish ancestors who did big name changes, and not specifically, mine came over earlier, so it was not a Holocaust thing. I have done a little bit of Jewish ancestry for a friend. I'm very bad at it, and I believe her ancestors mostly came over before the Holocaust, But all of that is really interesting. You get into that time period in Germany, actually, the records were really, really well kept. Um, there's a book called IBM and the Holocaust that talks about how they kind of invented the science of using computers to track the census in large part so that they could identify all the Jews so that they could do bad things to them. And it's really bad. The book is amazing. Book is really eye-opening about that. It's not at all about genealogy. It's mostly about computers, but it sheds a lot of light on um, how well kept the census records were. It was for a really bad reason, but the data is there. And so maybe we can use the data to do something good. Um, Owls, if you are interested in connecting offline and building out a little owly tree, I think that would be super fun. So, what do we want to do? I'm still trying to figure out, Abe, what we want to do for you. Because you have a tree somewhere. Well, and it was your original question, right? Like, how reliable is the claims of European royal families in your tree? That is a super good question. I think I fixed it so that you can post links in chat. I think. But if we wanted to look at a profile, I don't want to start with yours. Although you'll be private to me because you could, yes. So if we did start with yours, you'd be private. I'm just trying to think, where would we want to start? Because we could actually go find, like, okay, where's the royal ancestry claim in your tree, and we could just go see if we can prove it. I could go look at, let me go find, while we're doing that, I'm going to go find my royal dude. So here's my guy. Okay. So this is an example of what you can find on, I would say, if you are trying to prove out or ask questions about, or if there's a claim of royal ancestry in your tree and you want to know whether it's valid or not, I think WikiTree is doing the best work anywhere on the internet to do this. It's possible that there are subreddits doing specific family lines, or that some of the ancestry societies, right? Some of the ancestor societies are doing that. But I think really, like, the good stuff is being done on WikiTree. And so here's an example. This happens to be the royal ancestor that I'm descended from. And we can start here. There's a concept that you can look for. Yeah, exactly, right? Like, we're all descended from these people. It's just like, do we want to go play the game of finding out how? And does that documentation exist? I thought it was pretty delightful when I got to where I can kind of, sort of trace my ancestry back to this guy. If I go down to the bottom, is it the bottom? No, it's not the bottom. Is it? It's on Family Tree and Tools for Peter Warden. I can scroll down and find Connection to Me. Or Relationship Finder. I'm going to do Relationship Finder because that is the descent finder. Relationship to Me. If I click that and I'm logged in as me, boom. There. Oh yeah, that's lovely. That worked great. So you can now see, for that person, how does WikiTree think that you are connected to this royal ancestor? There we go. Oh, cool. We can put that in. Okay, Colson. Oh, Mowbray. Yeah, I know the Mowbray name. Sorry, I was briefly one of the leaders of the Magna Carta project, which is one of the really fun projects where they are working hard to find. There we go. Oh, so not yet connected via WikiTree. So unless, I'll do that. Give that a minute. Oh, nope. I take it back. There it is. Oh, yeah, because he's so far back, of course. Right, that's going way far back. Got it. Super cool. So the connection's in there. So I'll talk about kind of what we were doing in the Magna Carta project. Is we were basically we were building out all of those lines, and kind of we would go through here and find. There's a concept in Magna Carta and other royal ancestries for us North American peoples. There is a concept that we have called a gateway ancestor. And the idea behind the gateway ancestor is that it is a migrant who came from the old country to North America at a particular point, and that person is someone that we know is that we can prove is descended from royalty back in Europe. And then what you're doing as a modern day researcher is if you yourself can connect your line back to a gateway ancestor, then you know that the rest of the research to royalty has already been done. It's already been done and documented. So the gateway ancestor is a shortcut. It's not the only path to royalty, especially for folks who have more recent migrant ancestors. There may be folks back in the old country, right? But I've encountered it both in New England and also in Virginia, migrants from England specifically. So the gateways tend to be in that realm. Doesn't tell us about something like Germans who descended from German royalty. This is very much focused still on English royalty. And there's the Magna Carta project was about going back to the original 21 barons who signed the Magna Carta, of which I think a dozen of them are known to have living descendants, or who had descendants past some number of generations. The rest of them did not. Mowbray is one of them. So Mowbray is one of the original Magna Carta sureties. What the Magna Carta project is doing is it is attempting right now to make sure that from the gateway ancestor, so in my case, Peter Warden is my gateway, from the gateway ancestor back to the sureties that they're supposedly descended from, that those paths have been entered and the profiles have been built out with enough information and sources so that the thing that is already researched and known is accurately reflected on Wikitree. So I am looking for who is likely to be. John Sherburne must be our gateway ancestor, right? Did he? Yep, he came from England to New Hampshire. So he is a migrant here. And is he a gateway? John Sherburne. Why don't we Google it? John Sherburne gateway ancestor. Let's see if that's true. He's got a Wikipedia page. That's always a good sign. Always a good sign. So, immigrant. Lineal descendants of the Sherburne family could trace their lineage to Charlemagne. Boom. So this dude's a gateway ancestor. So if you can trace your ancestry accurately, oh look, I just brought in a really important word. If you can trace your ancestry accurately back to John Sherburne, then we already know that John Sherburne is already traceable back to Charlemagne. That work has been done. The research from Sherburne, for example, back to his original, back to the sureties and so on and so forth, is my favorite source for that. And the reason I bought this giant box set is the Royal Ancestry series by Douglas Richardson. That's sort of the canonical book that the Magna Carta project uses, because it has a teeny little abstract of all of the royal research that's been done all the way back. And so the books are a little hard to use, they're a little hard to trace, and you have to kind of have the full set because your ancestors will jump from volume to volume. They're not neatly in a single, like your family can't just buy volume 3 and call it good. But I got the whole thing. I can do lookups in it. Part of the reason I got it was to make sure that I was kind of shored up on Peter Warden here. And so let's talk about, given that Peter Warden or John Sherburne is a known gateway ancestor, that piece has been done. So we now have a point in time that we know this is a person we know is descended from royalty. It's proven, the documents are there. Wikitree is getting better at making sure that all that proof is available and you can see it. They're still clawing their way through that, but that was the work that we were doing on that project, and it's pretty cool to watch everybody putting that work in. You'll see things like on Peter Warden's profile, the ones that have been finished have the Gateway Ancestor badge on them. And that means that somebody's gone through and done the work. I think in this case it was me, but on a lot of the other ones it's other people. So Peter Warden's been researched. So now what we have to do is I then have my responsibility is to make sure that this line from Peter to me is accurate and that I've proven it, right? The ancestry societies don't all go do that. The Magna Carta Project doesn't prove him down to me. It just proves the gateway. So then I have the responsibility of proving that I'm related to the gateway ancestor. And in some cases, I think now that we have the proof here, this actually was my weak spot for a lot of years because Honeywell Hammond, we had some guesses that he was that family. And it mattered that he was the son of Benjamin II, Benjamin III, I think. Where is it? Joseph. That's right. Sorry, Joseph. Forgot about Joseph, right? Being on this line mattered because, oh, look, the connection to Warden is going through a maternal line. So it goes Hammond for a few generations, but then it's hopping into Rachel Winslow. So it's not good enough to say the Hammonds themselves are not all descended from Peter Warden. Only the Hammonds that married into Rachel Winslow. So, Abe, so you can accurately verify your first 6 generations. Let me put them back in there. Colson, 42. So what you're trying to do, oh wait, there it is. It's still in there. What we're trying to do is we want to get John Sherburne. So we want to get you Sherburne 151. That's the one that you need to shore up. So let's talk about this. This is the trail. That's pretty good because you've got a lot of Sherburnes. That's probably, I'm going to wild guess that that's in a Sherburne book, right? Something like that. And I don't know the Sherburne family. I don't have a connection myself to the Sherburne family, but it looks like, let's open this dude in a new tab. Sorry, new tab. Tink. Here. Which this is interesting. Now, when did he, okay, so he came over 1653. So maybe not the original Puritan Great Migration. Reports vary as to whether that is ended in 1640 or ended in 1650. But there are some good quality sources here, right? And if he was anywhere in New England, good chance that the New England Historic Genealogical Society has, like this looks like good data. And it is quoting sources that look legit to me. Walter Goodwin Davis is fantastic. A really good quality source there. Those are usually pretty reliable. We can go here and look. Look, they have pulled a free book on archive.org that we looked at before. Descendants of Henry and John Sherburne of Portsmouth. So that's your gateway guy. Right, so if this book, not just is it in the book, but of course, is it in the book and backed by records? Oh, look how well sourced this is. Yummy. Oh, that's beautiful, man. This looks like an article from the journal, actually, from the New England, the Register. It looks like it's an article from the New England Historic and Genealogical Register that may have been reprinted as a book. It probably is because it's referencing the Register, which means I feel pretty good about. So any data that you got out of this is probably pretty well researched. So let's go back to that trail. Right? We're trying to just walk this trail and see, is there anybody in here, probably around in this space here, is when things maybe get a little dicey, right? Because that's going to be where you don't have the census. You'd want to figure out, how do you know for sure the relationship between Mary here and Morris here and Mariah here? These 3 are probably the ones I would want to look at real hard and say, yeah, see, this is pretty basic right now. So I would, if I were going and saying, do I think that you are for sure, oh, look, there's a DNA connection from somebody else named Height, right? So likely, and the thing with WikiTree is just because it's not here on WikiTree doesn't mean that the documentation doesn't exist. WikiTree is still catching up. People are still adding things to it that they've had on other sites for years. So we could go and look at that person's information over on Family Search, which has the benefit of being free. More stuff. Sources are here. So we've got a baptism. That's good. Mary Sherburne. Right? So then we can go and say, does this tell us of Jethro Sherburne? That's cool. Right? So if we've got even just good, it's so nice that there's good baptism records in New Hampshire. That's nice. You don't always get that. Right? So if the data here is decently, if you've got good documentation on that says that she really is the daughter of Jethro and she really is the mother of Morris, you won't have her in the U.S. Census by name because of the time period that she lived. So it'll have to be other kinds of records, might be probate records, right? You may have a good quality family Bible that's been handed down, right? So, but that would be where I would be zeroing in on those generations, as those are the ones where the link is likely to be tenuous and there's the most value in shoring that up and proving out that trail, making sure it's accurate. Somebody dropped this in. Oh, somebody dropped this in, who knows, right? And so adding the sources so that someone else like me coming in can go, really? How do we know? Right? That's helpful. Oh, we don't have her spouse in there yet, but I'm sure you know who it is, right? So, and on WikiTree, adding those profiles in is a lot of heavy manual labor, right? It's a lot of writing the bio and creating a source bibliography, and you do have to do a lot of it by hand in a way that it's quicker on Family Search, right? We looked on Family Search. It's much quicker there. It's even quicker on Ancestry because that user experience is being refined and has been there longer. But either one of these, just giving me a breadcrumb to be able to come here and say, oh, whoa, there's a lot of stuff here, right? There's a lot more data that you did not yet type in by hand into WikiTree. Great, right? Looks legit. So yeah, I'm gonna say you're probably good to go on that whole Magna Carta thing. I would say that looks pretty solid, right? It's only a matter of then filling out the profiles and documenting it better, but it looks right to me, assuming that you know these generations are right, and I bet you do. So that's pretty cool. So, oh, Nancy DeMorris is sketchy, right? So then it becomes, okay, what can you find in land records, probate records, right? Depending on where they were. And New Hampshire, I mentioned I was pleasantly surprised that you had good New Hampshire christening records. They aren't always. I have, for me, it's Vermont. I can't remember if I have a New Hampshire or if it's Vermont and Maine, but like that whole area, some of it was documented well and some of it wasn't. Yeah. So, yeah, wow, we've kind of been all over the place, but that's kind of what I was hoping for with the stream, right? Is that we'd get to have this as a conversation with all of you and go like figure out what are you interested in. What we got at least another 10 minutes. I know some of you are observing Mother's Day, and do that. Moms are important. I will be doing that. We will be ending it. We will be ending on time today because I got to go finish cleaning the kitchen because my mom's coming over. We didn't talk about my mom's tree at all. Well, no, we did in passing. I didn't show you a whole lot of my mom's tree. I think what I'll do... Yeah, I'm going to come back here and play with this a little bit while we're waiting. So here we have a maternal line. Here's Harry's mom, Ella. And we haven't done any of the work to go figure out where Ella came from, but we knew that her maiden name was Wilcox because we found it on Sister Mabel's death certificate, which we loved. That was super exciting. So finding that was a really big deal. And we found her death record in New York, and we don't have her death certificate. I have Eugene's death certificate. I don't have Ella's. But let's see if we can. The time we have. Thank you, sweetheart. Sweetheart emptied the dishwasher. Love that. Let's see if we can find. There we go. If we could find something about Ella Wilcox and Eugene Hammond. Do we know when they got married? 1874. How do we know that? 1900 census. So we don't have their actual marriage record. Okay. That's fine. Is there a marriage record in here? No. Okay. Fine. But from our Hammond census records and New York census records, we know that she was born in 1856 in Wisconsin. Yep, we have that from all of these different census records. So if we look at those hints, and we know that she used the middle initial H. I don't know what it stood for. Sometimes they will use the initial of their maiden name as their middle initial after they're married, but this is legit, like she's using the H even before she's married. So here we have Ella Wilcox in Rock County, Wisconsin, 1870 and 1860. What I like to do is work backwards from the more recent dates where we know things more securely, right? And work our way back to the older ones rather than the other way around. Because that way we're kind of following we're taking smaller steps. Right? We're making less of a leap with the data. So let's start with, we've got the 1925 census. We know that's her. We've got the 1915 New York census. I'm going to skip those because we already know those are her. And then we've got 1885. She's Ella Hammond. There. They just changed this interface. It's really interesting what they're doing here. This is definitely our Ella because she's in the household with Eugene. Here's her. We know she had her son Irving. This is Honeywell. The spelling is what it is. And Emily. And we actually have this record already saved to like Eugene or somebody. So we are going to add, and this new interface I'm still puzzling my way through, but I want to cite sources and it's not giving me that automatically. So I want to make sure I do that. All right, we save that to the tree. And then it's not offering me to add that census to the other families because it's not grouped by household. Fine, it's what it is. So we've got that. Let's look at 1870. We want to figure out, I'm trying to be a good role model here, because do I know enough just from this record to know for sure that that's her? Wilcox is not a rare name, right? Wilcox is a name that other people could have. Ella, also not an uncommon name. So I happen to know from having researched her before that this is her, but I'm trying to have us look at it with a skeptical eye and say, and how do we know that? How do we know that? I don't know. I don't remember how we know. I'm gonna stall and I'm gonna just add records that we do know. This one is Beaver Butler, New Hartford, Iowa. We know that's you. So we'll go ahead and add you here. New Hartford, Iowa. I'm gonna fix this guy because New Hartford, Butler County, Iowa. Save that to the tree. That looks good. We know this, right? This is where we got her maiden name from. That's great. Looking good. And yes, we want to connect it to both of them. Source for his name, source for her name, source for her birth. Right, Social Security record. Oh, New Hartford, Iowa. New Hartford, Iowa. New Hartford, Iowa. That's better. That's more precise than what we had. We like that. Okay, very good. And remember that I'm going to overwrite if it's less precise, I can overwrite it with more precise. Right? I don't mind doing that. I won't do it the other direction. And if they're completely different, if they're both precise and they're completely different, then I may add one as an alternate fact. Okay, so what we're trying to figure out is, do we know, still stalling, do we know that the Ella H. Wilcox, this is what's tantalizing, is that H, right? Because we know that she used the H, middle initial. This is Ella living with Harry in New York. There's kind of an interesting thing here. Oh, yeah. See, remember, we got to take the ward out. Where she's only living with Harry. She's not living with Eugene, even though Eugene is still living. Have not actually figured out what is up with that. They both lived in Buffalo, and they were never, as far as I know, they didn't divorce or anything, but they were living in separate homes. Partly to do with, like, one of them was recorded at the boarding house. So, like, maybe it had to do with that they were running the businesses and not so much that they were estranged. I don't know. No, we're clearing this out. I don't know about this South Dakota thing. I'm coming back to that later. Don't know about Kansas. I am dubious about Kansas. Oh, at that time, she would have been Hammond. So I can ignore that because her name would have been different. 75, I don't know, though. That one I don't know for sure. Okay. New York, though. New York, this is you. Okay. Edit. That looks fine. I want those to be connected as a source. This is a little bit more clunky than it used to be. I'll be honest. It used to be easier to do this. All right. There. Oh, Henrietta. Could be. That could be. I wish I could find that documented somewhere, but I bet your dad actually knew, right? Yeah. One of our cousins, Dee, also, because it's over on Family Search this way, and I have been reluctant to change it back, says that her first name was actually Llewellyn, but I have absolutely nothing documenting like how we know that. That our cousin who's descended from Irving, like, yeah, Irving might have known that. I don't, other than word of mouth, I don't know how we know, so I haven't put it in my tree. So Llewellyn Henrietta is quite a name if that's what her name was. That's pretty cool. So, okay, so now we're looking at these three records here, right? Because we know, we go back to what we know about Ella. We know that they were married about 1874, and that could be give or take, especially on this census. It's asking how many years have you been married. So we know that that could be maybe imprecise and could be give or take a few. If her birth date is correct, she was 18 here. There are some communities where marrying much younger than that happened, but in the communities that we're studying, they mostly did not marry much younger than 18. So we'll see. So probably not much before that. If Irving was born in 1876, how we don't know exactly when, but if he was born in 1876, that this could be 1875 without it being a scandal, right? Of course, it could be 1876 or 77 for all we know, but for the most part, we're in that ballpark of around the time of the first child. So, the reason I care about that is it possible that in 1875 her name was still Wilcox? Maybe. Let's look. Who's that? Oh, that looks to me, from the way these are listed, notice how the ages are out of order. So I'm keying in on the fact that the ages here in the bottom right are out of order. If we pop this up and actually look at it on the record. Where's Wilcox? There, at the top of the page. Yep. And that is the order that they are on the page. It's quite blurry. That's not you. That's not me. That's it. Quite blurry. But here we have a Wilcox family. This is something that I am making a leap here that is not totally proven, but it's a guess. Typically, on census records, they would go with the head of household and then the spouse, typically male head of household unless it was headed by a widow. So the man of the house, then his wife, then their children in order by age, sometimes boys then girls, but usually by age. So you'll have the children listed in order of age, and then after that, they will have anybody who was extra sort of roomers or boarders or other extended family members living in the house. And so why I care that these are out of order is that if Lumen here and Ella were children of Homer and Emma Wilcox in this household, I would expect them to be listed under, it would go Sarah, then Lumen, then Ella, then Jessie, then Georgia. That's what I would expect to see in that order, right? That would be normal to me, is if they were all meant to be children of that family. What you sometimes see is that this Lumen may be a son of this family, and Ella is his wife. They are of an age where they would have been newly married, but they didn't have land yet. And so they're living at home with the parents. We saw Eugene and Ella living with Honeywell. Same kind of deal, right? So the fact that they are listed out of order and at the bottom of this census makes me think that Ella Wilcox here is Ella somebody else who married Lumen Wilcox and is in the family home in Kansas. Now, if I really wanted to prove that out, I would go look for this family. I would go try to prove or disprove, could this be my Ella in this family? Because it's not out of the question that I could be wrong and they could be listed out of order for any number of reasons. So my guess is that Ella is a Wilcox by marriage in this household and that that's not my Ella. I'm at least not going to accept it. What I might do is just let it sit here, and then I can go prove or disprove. I would probably do that. Oh, I might be able to do, hang on. If I go look at the record page, this is how it used to be. It used to take you to this page to look at the hint. And now what I can do, oh, boom. This is what, so Ancestry, when you're doing a search, gives it to you this way. Let me make this text bigger. This text a little bigger. It gives you this cool thing. These suggested records on the end here. What oftentimes is happening is that they are doing machine learning off of the work that other people have done on Ancestry's platform, which means, what I mean by that is, let's say that somebody else that I'm never going to meet has a tree that has Lumen and Ella in it, and they've attached this record because they say, yes, that's my Ella, right? And they've also attached in their same tree all these other records to that same person. And so it's going to say, hey, if you like this record, you might also like all these other records that are attached to the same person in other people's trees. And what I can see just from glancing down the list here is that this is an Ella Wilcox who goes on, if we assume that this is correct and that all these are the same person, we have an Ella Lucretia or Ella Loretta Wilcox who remains Ella Wilcox later on, right? 1875, 80, 1900, 1910, 1920, 1930. She's got a find a grave. And prior to 1875, she was Ella Matthews. That's the story this is telling me. Now, do I want to go look? Yeah, let's go look on Find a Grave and see if it's got a bio. Let's see if it's got a bio. Matthews, married to Lumen Wilcox. Boom. So here's Ella Wilcox. She was married to Lumen Wilcox. That was his spouse. And she died in 1935. And this is not my Ella. So I can now go back. I could click no there, or I could go back here and click no here. This is not my Ella. I can make that go away. Because that's Ella Matthews. Matthews Wilcox. That leaves me with these two records, which I'm wondering, are those my Ella? How do I know? Well, let's see. If I click into, let's say we click into this one. Why don't we go do the same trick? We've got Chester, Mariah, maybe that's Maria, William, Walter, Ella, and Mary. Nothing leaps out right yet. I don't see any names being reused, for example, right? If there were family names, I'd be interested. I don't know yet. I'm going to go look at the record page because I want to see what comes up. Well, now, what we're going to get is all those hints that are caused by me because of me having attached these. This record is saved to people in multiple trees. Well, yes, it's in all of my trees. It's in all my trees because I already think this is her. How did I know that? And this may actually point me to some records that I might not have known existed. But what I think, where do I have? want to go look at her in, let's go look at her in this one, because this is a public tree anyway. Do I have a marriage record? Yes, I do. Haha. Okay, that's how we got there. Okay. And that is, so we went, all right, quickie, and then I'll be done. I promise, because it's Mother's Day. Marriage records. This is actually a cool resource, and I will point you at it and leave it to you. Wisconsin State, no. Wisconsin History. There we go. So the Wisconsin History site is very cool because it has vital records. Where are they? Vital records, search tips. Can I just do that? Ella Wilcox. Let's see. Haha. Okay, this is where I wanted to go. And then I can narrow this down. What I want is a marriage record. Pre-1907 vital records. That's what I want. If I do that, yes! Haha! Yes, we did. Okay. They store these really weird and really frustrating, but it's going to be helpful. We have Ella Wilcox in Rock County, Wisconsin. Go back here. Hang on. Let's go back to where we were on our hints. We are trying to ascertain whether this Ella H. Wilcox, who is in Rock County, Wisconsin, and who we know married Eugene Hammond around 1874 because her census told us so. So we want to find out, is that Ella the same, are those the same people? Right? And so what we have that's super tantalizing right here is an Ella Wilcox in 1874 in Rock County, Wisconsin. And then the slightly frustrating thing that happens here is that Wisconsin stores their bride's index and their groom's index as two separate records, and they're not quite connected to each other. But we can now see we have the exact day, November 1st, 1874. And what they'll go do is they'll just go find all of the grooms that were married on that day, and they'll say it's one of these. So let's see what we get. Is one of them, holy cow, one of them's a Hammond. It's Eugene Hammond. We now know, we can actually just go ahead and copy this straight on over. And let's go do that first. This is, we now have this, 1st of November, 1874 in Rock County, Wisconsin. There we go, wisconsinhistory.org index. And we save that bad boy right there. So now we have a marriage record that says Ella and Eugene married in exactly the year that we expected them to. And the detail that we learned from that we didn't know before is in Rock County, Wisconsin. We knew she was born in Wisconsin, but we didn't know anything else. So we now know Rock County. Open question. Where's Rock County, Wisconsin? And how big is it? How big is it? I wanted to make sure that it's not a major city. If it's a major city, that, big, if it's a really big area, really, really populated, maybe that doesn't narrow it down as much. But if it is a relatively more rural area, like the bigger an area, the more densely populated the area, the more the chances are that there could be people with the same names, right? You get into New York City and all bets are off. I've done minimal research in something like New York City, a little bit. It's challenging. There are other tricks you use to make that work. Anyway, so here we are. Yeah, I feel good about it, right? So what we're trying to what we now have is we have a fact that links our Ella that we know is our Ella. We know that's her marriage record, right? That's going to be those are the right people. Our Ella is now linked to not just Wisconsin, but Rock County, Wisconsin. And 1874 is pretty close to 1870, which is where that census is. that census hint, 1870. So I would feel pretty good about taking Ella Wilcox. In this 1870 census, what's interesting is she's 14 living with, presumably that is a sister, but in a household with people with another name. She's not with parents who share her name, which is interesting. There. And we want to go here and cite source. And we want to cite source. And I wish I didn't have to do that by hand. That's a new change that I don't like. So she's living with Lauren and Nancy Finch. We don't know who those people are right now. We don't know why she's living with them. And then we go to 1860. This will be the first census that she's named in, because in 1850 she wasn't born yet, right? But here she is, and we do have that telltale H. We like that a lot. We feel better about that being the same person. And here she is with people having the same surname. So one hopes that those maybe are her biological family. And so we're going to save that to the tree. And the 1860 census on Ancestry does not automatically attach the whole family for us. The 1871 tries to, but it didn't, because it can't figure out how she's related to those Finches, and I can't either, right? But Bradford, okay, so Bradford, Rock County, Wisconsin. There we go, Bradford Rock. Got it. And so here she is, but what we now have is the 1860 census telling us that maybe her parents are named Chester and Mariah. And so on that note, so we'll go with Chester, Wilcox, question mark, and Mariah. And I'm typing those in because we saw them on the 1860 census. They are in this record. I'm typing them in by hand. And then what I would be doing is I'd be going back in and adding the connection, the record, the 1860 record, to both of them. So we got Mariah, right. Mariah, and we don't know. We don't know her last name. There we go. All right. I said I was going to end on time. Totally didn't end on time. I feel good about it. So here we have now lots more hints have opened up. That's going to take us in the world of Ancestry. We're still in the census time period where people are named. We get a lot of really good hints from this time period. We should be able to learn just from hints a lot of stuff about them. And what we noticed on that other tree is Family Search actually has the record of Eugene and Ella's marriage in their index as well. So we could go over onto Family Search and attach that to a Family Search tree. So yay, a tiny bit of a maternal line. Yay, that was fun. And this is good because I can now use this tree that I purpose built for the stream, but I can do it from my account that has the membership, and we can get more data, and that will be cool. Anyway, with that, there we go. Oh wait, now I gotta move you over here so that I'll be looking at you. There you go. With that, I want to say thank you to you all who joined the stream today. It was super fun being able to chat a little bit. I'm still working on noticing the chat and making sure that I don't miss your messages. There is a bit of a delay. So, yes, Pam, you are correct. If we get to Mariah's parents and her family, maybe she had a sister who married and became a Finch. Yes, that's exactly what is likely to have happened, right? Or at least that's exactly what I would also look for first, is anybody there. Do I need a sign-off pupper? I have a sleeping pupper here, and it would be really sad to wake him up. So if you want to bring a pupper who wants to come and say bye, that would be great. Sign-off pupper. Yeah. Thank you everybody for joining. I do think the interactivity was fun. I think we can continue to explore. Oh, thank you, Pam. We can continue to explore your questions and your trees and spawn some little lookups and maybe get you on the path of finding out what you can learn about your family. Again, that's what I'm here for. I've already done my tree. I know what's in it. You don't care about my tree, except Pam does because it's her tree too. But you don't have to care. Oh, do we have a pupper? Hello, look. Hello. It's Pasha. I don't expect you all to care about the gory details of my tree. The reason that we're sharing them is so that you can understand the techniques that we use and how you can employ the same techniques to apply to your tree. And if at some point we end up building out one of your trees and doing that together on the stream, I'm totally down. I'm interested in new problems to solve and new people to talk to who care about listening to me go on about this stuff. Because I assure you, in my real life, I have run out of people who want to hear me talk about this stuff. So thank you for being here. And this video will be up on the video on demand via Twitch. You can watch it after the stream. And big news, big news, big news. We have moved all of our video on demands over to a new YouTube channel called Twitch Genealogy. All of the full episodes of this stream that have been recorded are over there. So if you've missed any and you want to watch them, the reason we moved them to YouTube is because they're only kept for a short time on Twitch. Once they move to YouTube, they can sit there forever and you can go back and read. So by next stream, I will put something, I'll have a link that I can throw in the chat. I forgot to make a link for the chat. But I will share a link in the chat that you can go watch all the videos on demand or go onto YouTube and search for Twitch Genealogy. Curious to know if you can find it. In the meantime, and feel free to reach out in the comments or contact me on Wikitree or any of the other channels that you've seen me in. Love to look at problems like that together. And if there's something that you want to research offline, I find this fun. So let me know. And have a wonderful Mother's Day, whatever that may mean to you. Celebrate it with thinking about all the maternal lines, not just the most immediate one that's close to us, but thinking about all the benefits of all the maternal lines throughout our tree and what they've all brought us is pretty cool to think about. So regardless of the status of your relationship with your immediate mother, there's probably folks in your maternal ancestry that are pretty cool to think about, and I hope you enjoy researching them and thinking about them. And thanks for sharing it with me. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.